Well, thanks again, Michael, and thanks for having me back a second time. And I'm really pleased to be following Tony because I think I hadn't seen your presentation before, but they flow nicely together, and I think there's a lot of complementarity there. We're hitting on the same points, and I think that it's a bit of a variation on a theme, and really gives me an opportunity here to pick up where I left off before lunch and provide some of the background underlying the public transport vision in Canada, and also to give a plug for the UITP Global Summit that will be happening, the next one, in Canada in May of 2017. Now, I think I've spoken about Transit Vision 2040 at BIC or at other Australian audiences in the past, but this concept of a generational blueprint for the future of public transport in Canada is 5 years old now and has undergone what we called our first 5-year review with at least one major change. And as a way of framing the debate about the 5 big trends, issues, and challenges, I might ask this fundamental question: is public transport a leader or a laggard? Has public transit become a social service that merely offers basic access for those who cannot or choose not to drive? Is public transport bringing real value to society in the billions of dollars of public subsidies it consumes? Is the lack of efficiency and effectiveness, scandals such as Mikey and Opal, and excessive political bickering, debasing the public transport brand? Are we as an industry nimble enough to get ahead of the curve, or are we destined to become roadkill next to surging technology like Uber? To put that in perspective, in Canada, nearly every community with a population of more than 10 or 20,000 people has a transit system. The bigger the city, the larger the share of people who use it as a personal choice. That is to say, they have a car available for the trip but have decided not to use it. In the biggest cities, half of the public transport trips are so-called choice trips. And patronage is setting new records every year, recently crossing the symbolic threshold of 2 billion transit trips across Canada and growing at a rate double that of the population. Fares cover on average 60% of direct operating costs, nowhere near Singapore, but high by North American standards. The benefits, I would say, are compelling. Now, I mentioned a bit about our association, about CUTA before lunch, but the shift to integrated mobility deserves repeating. The association's new vision statement is 10 short words: to inspire and influence the evolution of integrated urban mobility. And the words transit or transport don't even appear. So what does that mean? Well, our Integrated Urban Mobility Task Force has been working on some definitions and has come up with these. Integrated urban mobility is the ability for people to move easily from place to place in urban areas according to their own needs. And mobility management is the coordination and optimization of all modes of transport to enable ease of travel in urban areas. But why are we doing this? We're doing it because today's transport realities are less about the old paradigms of roads and railways or about buses and cars. Less about highways and infrastructure. Those, ladies and gentlemen, are yesterday's issues, and young people care less and less about that. Today's young people are getting their driving licenses later in life and are looking for lifestyles that save them time and money. They want work and school and shopping and recreation to be easily accessible, integrated, and connected. In short, they want 3 things: connectivity, proximity, and mobility, like the 20-minute city. That is to say, they want to be connected, they want to be linked to their friends, colleagues, and family, whether it's through Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Connectivity is key. They want to be near where they hang out. That means making sure home, work, school, shopping, and recreation are close together. And they want to be able to get there easily, efficiently, and seamlessly on a moment's notice. We used to talk about gridlock and traffic congestion. We still do. It may be the biggest transport engineering and planning challenge that we have. Gridlock is technically defined as a situation where the number of vehicles exceeds the capacity of the roadways, and traffic no longer moves freely through intersections. But what's really more important, moving cars or moving people and goods? Because the average car carries fewer than 1.2 people, and the average bus carries about 40 or more. So adding only 2 buses, and this diagram is statistically correct, by the way, based on average vehicle occupancy rates, adding only 2 buses reduces the number of cars required to move the same number of people, thereby making much more efficient use of road space. It's not rocket science. But maybe we should be less concerned about moving vehicles and more about moving people and goods. Do any of you notice what's missing in these diagrams? Lots of things are missing. There's no parking, there are no footpaths, there are no bike lanes, no turning lanes. They're certainly not what we would call complete streets, which I would say is a critical concept in terms of quality of life and optimizing the use of road space. The difference is clear in this image, looking at pedestrian and cycling facilities, transit priority, and smart design that caters to a 20-minute city. The transport cocktail, as is so aptly called in Quebec, bringing together public transit, walking, cycling, bike sharing, car sharing, and making it seamless. We call it integrated urban mobility. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me step back a bit and position this in context. 5 years ago, CUTA developed a visioning exercise to create this blueprint for the future of public transit in Canada, Transit Vision 2040. Its purpose was to identify challenges and opportunities and chart how public transit could optimize access and mobility in Canadian communities for the next generation. The vision consists of, again, 6 major themes, each of which contain several strategic directions. And these have guided our plans and actions ever since. I'm not going to go into the details here today because I just don't have time, only to say that in the revision, we've added a 7th theme, harnessing technology, and that elements from these themes make up the 5 things that we absolutely need to get right in order for public transport to be a leader and not a laggard. That is, if we're not going to be the roadkill left behind by advancing trends. First, urban mobility will be more important than ever before. And given lifestyle aspirations and trends, future growth will likely be concentrated in the same suburbs that now experience some of the biggest mobility challenges. So one of the strategies will be to change urban form by intensifying land use and making the suburbs more urban, as John Stanley so eloquently mentioned this morning, and making public transport plans inextricably linked to urban development and land use. We need to get it right. That requires strong policy instruments and political will. As such, suburban communities will work on retrofitting low-density, single-use suburbs with more compact transit-supportive modes. Often, the catalyst will be rapid transit, which, when carefully planned, can develop nodes and mobility hubs that bring together lifestyle elements with mixed-use compact developments. It can involve entire suburban transformations sparked by the redesign of major streets with BRT corridors. A good example is York Region north of Toronto, where entire future growth plans are structured around this transformation. Let's take a moment to see how that looks. Can we have that video, please? Thank you. We're not getting the visual part of this. It's good audio. Look, if it won't come up, I'll just move on, since we are short of time. What it does is it shows visually how, oh, here we go. How BRT can be used as a catalyst to restructure outer low-density suburbs into a more compact development and create more efficient urban form together with and with the support of bus rapid transit. The second thing we need to get right is making sure that every decision we make is focused on the impact of service on the customer. It's about designing our services and systems around the customer, understanding their point of view, living their world so that we can properly put ourselves in their shoes. It's about being customers ourselves so we can develop that connection. Omotenashi, as your new chair at UITP says. All large cities and many medium-sized ones in Canada have a basic network of trunk lines that run every 15 minutes or better, ideally all day long. John says 20 minutes. I say that's not good enough. A so-called frequent transit network that can really build momentum. And yes, 15 minutes is a bit of magic. Why? Because studies have shown that that's the threshold at which people are prepared to go out to a bus stop and risk waiting an average of 7.5 minutes without a timetable. Furthermore, it's 4 times an hour. And if the same times repeat themselves, it's easy to remember. With today's smartphone apps, that's less important, but with the alternatives on the horizon, I put it to you that a bus service that's unable to support a 10 to 15 minute frequency will not survive the next technological revolution. Number 3, the value proposition. I talked about this morning a lot about government investment, and it's crucial. Long-term, predictable, and sustainable funding for capital and operating costs. We've worked hard to get that message across to elected officials and the general public, but we can never afford to take it for granted. We need to show this value day in and day out. You know, people often ask me, why does public transport lose money? Well, in my humble opinion, it doesn't lose money. It's a public service that happens to charge a fare and contribute to the costs through user fees. Compare that to other public services like police, fire, parks and recreation, roads and parking. If public transport were free, it wouldn't lose money. So it's all about approaching it with the right mindset and making sure we consider the benefit to the user and the benefit to the community and apply the costs accordingly. That's a big debate, but one that's critical if we're concerned about public transport demonstrating value to society. And eventually the debate will need to turn to road pricing, because paying for the use of our scarce public infrastructure will demand it, and Singapore is obviously an excellent example. The fourth thing we need to get right is to make sure our services are responding to the new demographic. Public transport tends to be best at serving peak hour travel to and from work and school. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's changing. The aging of the population will present real mobility challenges, especially in small communities, outer suburbs, and regional areas. What happens when a larger segment of the population can no longer drive or no longer wants to drive, and there are limits to how much we can rely on our family and friends to chauffeur us around? New innovative solutions will be needed to offer that mobility. And as I mentioned earlier, younger generations have clear lifestyle expectations that are less related to 20th century models of urban development. Those cities and communities that provide these amenities will be the ones that attract young people. There's going to be a huge competition to build the knowledge economies that retain this talent. So in many ways, the key will be intermodality. The integrated urban mobility that optimizes choice, for people who are looking for options other than driving alone in their cars. Because let's face it, you can't text or tweet behind the wheel, or at least you shouldn't. In 1983, 87% of 19-year-old Canadians had a driving license. By 2010, that percentage had fallen to 69. And fifth, and perhaps most important, new communications technology is enabling unprecedented access that also helps improve mobility in outer suburban areas. Ride matching to improve the efficiency of carpooling, peer-to-peer car sharing, taxi apps, real-time transit information, and easy-to-use bike and car sharing have significantly expanded the options in a relatively short time. If you think Uber is controversial, just wait. It's only the tip of the iceberg. The most promising revolution for low-density areas in particular is the concept we heard about just before lunch: autonomous vehicles. The recent advances in this technology have been nothing short of stunning. Some think it's science fiction, and a few years ago I would have agreed. But seeing what's happening now at Google, Ford, Volvo, BMW, and many others, I'm now convinced it's right around the corner. It will revolutionize transport as we know it. The startling advantage of autonomous vehicles is going to be their low cost. According to a recent Canadian estimate, a typical fare structure within an urban area, and this is of an optimized autonomous vehicle driverless taxi system, could be a $1 hiring charge and then 15 cents a minute and 10 cents a kilometer. Thus, a 5-kilometer journey at an average speed of 30K would cost $3, about the same as a bus fare. As such, autonomous vehicles could provide a great solution for low-density or even medium-density areas with their deployment optimized, reducing the need for private cars, for parking, for road space, and for empty buses on suburban streets. They will be fully electric and zero emission. They will be demand responsive, and technology will make it all happen. If you think about it, you can imagine the implications. Bus services unable to support a 10 to 15-minute service frequency will not survive this disruptive innovation. I'll leave the rest to your imagination because it's really just around the corner, only we can't see it because of the corner. It's much closer than we think. We already have Uber Pool that matches riders heading in the same direction, with fares up to 50% less than UberX. And Ride Split, which automatically charges you for only a portion of the total fare with 2 or 3 people traveling together. So, in conclusion, 5 things we need to get right, and they all need to work in unison. Transport land use integration will build the demand along key corridors to justify the high-frequency service levels that customers expect and that public transport will need to survive. Deliver value for money to society and respond to changing demographics and embrace technology. So in many ways, the question is, how do we turn the transport managers of today, those of us here in this room, into the mobility managers of tomorrow? Who will be the integrators and leaders to bring this about? What role can we play? What role can you play? Will we be leaders or laggards? Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Michael? There's one right down the very back left-hand corner, Georgie. Or my left-hand corner. The microphone's just about there.
It's just really a comment. Early in the year, I was at the Album Conference in the UK, and Sir Brian CUTA brought these same points up, that really the industry and the suppliers have got to work together for the threat of the likes of the Uber threatening the traditional passenger transport industry. But it's interesting coming here, hearing more or less the same message, perhaps in a slightly different way, but it's still the same thing. The industry's got to wake up to that fact.
Absolutely. I mean, even back home with our industry there, they're not seeing what's just around the corner, and I'm afraid that the models and the frameworks of the 20th century aren't going to be quick enough for us to be in a position to embrace this and for us to be the mobility providers of the future. The danger, the threat really is that we're going to be marginalized by new technology, and that new players coming from a totally different thought space are going to move in and take the space away from us. So it's really our challenge now to move ahead of this curve, to look around the corner and to find ways of working together between modes, bus, rail, ferry, taxi. Taxi in its traditional sense is going to be dead in the next few years. And with government to really inspire that disruptive innovation and be part of it in order to lead mobility into the future, rather than, as I say, kind of end up as the roadkill at the side of the highway.
Okay.
I was invited to be provocative this afternoon.
That was very good. That was very good.
Thank you.
So thank you, Michael.